Deep within the dark woods, a sinister presence lurks, trapping a family in its grip of fear. Guided by an enigmatic mentor, they set out to confront the malevolent forces plaguing their lives. But as they journey deeper, they realize the line between good and evil is dangerously thin. Get ready for a thrilling tale of supernatural terror and redemption as they fight to free themselves from the clutches of darkness. Welcome to our new story, The Demons in the Woods. Enjoy. Welcome, story lovers, to the latest tale. This story revolves around a man named Jordan, who encountered sinister entities in the woods. I am a voodoo priest, and together with my father, we assist people with their problems. Thus, we present this tale from our perspective. Jordan personally recounted his story to us, revealing that he inherited spiritual knowledge from his late grandfather, Franklin. He also informed us that his grandfather's death was anything but natural, of which he was certain. Furthermore, he expressed confusion regarding the circumstances of his grandfather's demise. Jordan was told that his grandfather was tethered to the earthly realm by an entity, preventing him from passing on to the afterlife. Before his passing, Franklin had transferred all his spiritual wisdom and abilities to Jordan, imparting the necessary skills and instructions. Under Franklin's guidance, Jordan mastered his grandfather's spiritual work admirably. It was also disclosed to us that Franklin had engaged in nefarious activities during his lifetime, performing dark deeds for paying clients who sought his aid. Jordan explained that his grandfather practiced black magic on behalf of these clients, fulfilling both good and often malevolent requests. Jordan followed suit after inheriting his grandfather's abilities. Grandfather Franklin was renowned for his effective black magic practices, always delivering results as desired by the client. Jordan aspired to match his grandfather's prowess. He adhered to rituals involving offerings on his altar, praying for success in his endeavors. Offering sacrifices was customary in his work, as the spirits demanded appeasement. Neglecting these obligations would yield unfavorable outcomes, Jordan warned. Once, Jordan failed to complete a sacrifice correctly, resulting in his partner becoming possessed. This incident led to the loss of his partner. Subsequently, Jordan refrained from pursuing relationships, as his involvement in the spiritual realm, particularly its darker aspects, frightened potential partners away. He noted that his powers were strongest during the full moon, drawing from years of personal experience. Conversely, during lunar and solar eclipses, his powers diminished. Fasting on certain days was integral to his practice, as taught by his grandfather. During these periods, Jordan ventured into the forest to capture entities for use in his work, preferring the seclusion of the woods over populated areas. Upon encountering a particular entity, Jordan tries to get it closer to him so he could catch it within a spiritually prepared stone. Once captured, the entity was bound to Jordan's will, required to fulfill his commands. Jordan provided these entities with symbolic homes, chains, bottles, or other objects, signifying their allegiance to him. Each entity received a name assigned by Jordan to avoid confusion during his work. Over the years, Jordan amassed a considerable collection of entities through these methods. While Jordan divulged these details, I listened with reluctance, disapproving of his malevolent pursuits. Jordan seemed unscrupulous, willing to fulfill any request for payment, regardless of its morality. After 9 years of practicing this spiritual work, Jordan desired to start a family. He met a woman named Ingrid, who embodied the qualities he sought in a partner: kindness and warmth. Their bond flourished, and Ingrid urged him to abandon his dark practices. Jordan shared her desire, but was uncertain how to proceed without guidance from his deceased grandfather, who held the knowledge he needed. Jordan faced a dilemma. How could he transition away from his current path? Years of delving into dark magic had bound him to the expectations of these entities, and breaking free seemed impossible. Ingrid insisted he cease his activities before they embarked on building a family together. He attempted to dispose of the items containing the trapped entities, but to no avail. It appears someone knew what these products were, as he couldn't get rid of them anywhere. Meanwhile, he constantly quarreled with Ingrid over trivial matters. Jordan learned from his grandmother Martha that his grandfather hadn't died under natural circumstances. It was all because of those things Grandpa used to fetch from the forest. According to Martha, they were demonic entities that had caused her husband's sudden demise. Those are demons that Grandpa brought home from the woods. Nothing good about these things. They only bring misery and sorrow. That's why you and your girlfriend are constantly fighting. Everything is going wrong between you, just as it did between Grandpa and me. I warned him many times, but he wouldn't listen, and it became his end, Grandma Martha told Jordan. Initially, Jordan didn't want to believe it, as his grandfather had never disclosed this to him. However, upon reflection, he concluded that his grandmother was right. Despite delving so deeply into the spiritual realm, he decided to quit everything altogether. He didn't know what consequences it would bring, but he had to try to find out if it was possible or not. Jordan couldn't get rid of the items anywhere, so he devised a plan that would cost him dearly. He packed all the products possessed by dark entities and decided to go to the forest, where he intended to hunt down these entities. With 2 full bags, he headed towards the forest, where he often went, with the plan to bury the products there. However, things went awry on the way to the forest. While driving, it felt as though the brakes had stopped working. Jordan tried to stop the car with all his might at a traffic light, but the car kept rolling. Fortunately, he had an older car, allowing him to pull the handbrake and bring the car to a halt. Deep down, Jordan knew it was because of the demons. He had never had problems with his brakes before. However, he was determined to bury the items, so he decided to continue driving slowly towards the forest. Once in the forest, he began digging a hole to bury all the items. When the hole was large enough, he retrieved the bag when suddenly he was shoved hard and fell into the hole himself. It was strange because there was no one nearby. Jordan tried to get up from the hole, but it felt as though someone was sitting on top of him, pushing him hard into the ground. He was in the grip of a demon and couldn't get up. Jordan decided to pray and continued praying until he felt the grip loosen. He managed to get up, but he knew he couldn't discard the items there. He decided to return home and look for another solution. However, it didn't take long before he started experiencing dark problems. He often went into trance states at the most unusual times. Initially, this happened occasionally, but as time passed, he went into trance more frequently until he entered it every day. When Jordan went into trance, various entities possessed his body and began demanding certain things. Most requested food, drink, or even cigarettes. These entities remained in his body until he eventually ran out of strength. Because Jordan had suddenly stopped his usual work, the entities were not pleased. Many rituals had been performed binding these demonic entities to Jordan spiritually. He had essentially created a contract with these demonic beings, and getting out of it wasn't easy. What Jordan thought was an easy exit from his work turned out to be far from the truth. Dealing with demons is not a game. Jordan saw his life rapidly deteriorating, just as he had witnessed with his grandfather. Back then, he didn't understand what was happening, but now he knew that Grandma Martha was right. The demons from the forest were responsible. After months of not offering sacrifices on his altar, he only became sicker. He grew thinner and thinner. Meanwhile, he searched for a way out, or a solution to escape this dire situation. But he couldn't find any way to free himself from this demonic grip. He also didn't know where to seek help. While Jordan wanted to continue, my father interrupted him and asked, "But Jordan, let me ask you one thing. What exactly do you expect from us?" Jordan said dejectedly, "I want to leave this dark world. I can't handle this anymore and want a normal life. This is destroying me completely. Look at me now. These things are slowly killing me and causing me suffering. I've tried all sorts of ways to break the curse, the binding, and the partnership between me and these entities. But I just can't. I've also sought help from some people, and they told me they couldn't help me because breaking the curse was impossible. If they were to remove those entities from me, it would mean my death, I was told. This is not what I want. I'm at my wit's end, which is why I've come to you for help." Before we continue with this story, please leave a like and a comment for our channel. If you like these true scary stories, please subscribe and enjoy every week. My father looked at Jordan and informed him that we have our own approach, and we could likely help him. The only thing we expected from him was his cooperation as we asked of him. My father asked him to open his heart to the one who created him, because this would not be an easy task. Jordan had been dealing with demons for almost 10 years. He had done many bad deeds in collaboration with these entities, so freeing him would be an enormous task for us. We informed him that not only his body, but also his home would be cleansed, because many dark entities resided there, and that's where he spent most of his time. Jordan had no problem with that. He wanted to be helped as soon as possible. We outlined a plan of action for Jordan, indicating when we would begin his liberation, but he didn't want to hear anything about it. He kept insisting on being helped the same day. He didn't want to go back home without being helped. According to him, this was a life and death situation, and he didn't want to spend another day in this condition, being taken over by demonic beings. They were already making him do many things against his will, bringing him disgrace. People were already starting to think he was crazy because of his behavior, and he didn't want this anymore. He wanted to be helped immediately. My father and I decided to proceed with our work right away, going beyond our usual preparations. Typically, we would first do our groundwork calmly, preparing for everything that needed to happen. But Jordan didn't give us the space for that because he refused to leave. We didn't want to disappoint Jordan's family, who had all come along. They were outside, as they were quite fed up with the situation too. After he and his family begged us, my father and I decided to go to the house where Jordan stayed. We wanted to assess and address the situation there. Before leaving for Jordan's house, we packed all the necessary items and performed our rituals first. When we finished, we decided to ride with Ingrid. Jordan was supposed to be in the car with us. I sat in the middle between my father and Jordan. On the way, Jordan lost consciousness. I already had an idea of what would happen since we had done such liberations before, and you notice a certain pattern. The demons always resist and go to great lengths. I didn't focus on what was happening to Jordan. When we arrived at Jordan's house, I suggested that the family should wait outside for a while. This was important because unexpected things could happen. Since we don't want to harm anyone unnecessarily, we always ask the family to stay away. The people agreed to our request and promised to watch from the street. We continued with our rituals and connected with Mother Earth. When I opened my eyes again, I saw Jordan staring blankly at his house without any movement or blinking. My father also noticed, and we immediately knew that he had gone into a trance. My father and I approached him and communicated with whatever had taken possession of Jordan's body at that moment. My father began asking the necessary questions. When he asked the thing who he was, it said it was the deceased grandfather, Franklin. I called the family to listen along, and they all said, based on the statements and behaviors, that they were convinced it was indeed Grandpa. There was no doubt in their minds. Everything in Jordan was the same as in Grandpa. For the family, it wasn't anything new, as they had previously told us that Grandpa occasionally manifested in Jordan. We asked Grandpa why he was manifesting in Jordan. Grandpa spoke calmly. After hearing his story, we concluded that he should no longer wander on Earth and that it was time for him to rest. He asked us to show him the path to where he could ultimately find peace, because he couldn't find it on his own. Grandpa knew we could help him with this, and he knew we were there to assist. We did as he asked and guided him to the other side of the light. It was a very emotional moment for the family. There were tears shed because they knew their grandfather couldn't just pop in through Jordan's body anymore. Grandpa had to rest, and they wouldn't be able to talk to him anymore. Before guiding Grandpa to the light, he begged us to help free Jordan from evil. That's why he came forward to speak. After Grandpa departed and Jordan came out of the trance, we asked Jordan to guide us to the place where he made all his offerings. Jordan did as we asked, and we walked to the room where his altar lay. As we walked, I could feel how possessed and unclean this place was. You could feel the dark energies, the chilling atmosphere, and the presence of demons. Once we arrived at the room, Jordan knocked on the door 3 times before opening it. Only then did we enter to assess the situation. What I saw was truly unsettling. I saw various bottles, perfumes, knives, dolls, photos of the deceased, clay pots, monkey skulls, a cow's head, teeth, and many other things I can't recall. It was a space where it was clear that dark energies were at work more than good ones. As soon as I entered the room, I had persistent goosebumps. We decided not to waste any time and immediately began the necessary cleansing of this place using our own rituals. We proceeded as follows. First, we began the spiritual and physical cleansing of Jordan. I placed the items we would be using on the floor in Jordan's workspace. I locked the door to the offering room and put the key in my pocket. Meanwhile, my father spoke with Jordan, and I noticed his eyes glinting strangely. He sat, and we sat directly across from him. We prayed. We lit a candle, and the fire illuminated the entire room. As soon as this happened, Jordan started screaming uncontrollably. It sounded as if someone had poured hot oil on him. That's how intense his screams were. I kept my eyes closed and focused on our prayer, while it was clear that Jordan was becoming possessed. My father and I continued with the prayer, and were not deterred by anything. When we finished the prayer, we opened our eyes and saw Jordan standing, looking fiercely, with a twisted iron rod in his hands. As we looked at him, he immediately tried to attack us, but he couldn't. Every time he tried to approach us, it was as if something was holding him back. He kept trying, but he couldn't get close to us. He made all kinds of animalistic and growling sounds, clearly indicating that he was demonically possessed. I took some of our blessed water, which we had made during our preparations for the prayer. I poured it on Jordan, and he immediately fell to the floor as if struck by lightning. He started making a strange sound, as if electricity was hitting him. He rolled back and forth on the floor due to the blessed water I poured over his body. My father performed some rituals on Jordan's trembling body. While my father blew on Jordan, it seemed as if he was regaining himself. I unlocked the door, and we helped him up because he seemed a bit weak. We left the offering room because we would continue to work on him there. When we arrived, we let him sit on the ground because he didn't have the strength to stand. Then, I poured the blessed water into the filled basin and bathed him. This took a lot of time, but after we completed our necessary rituals, the family present was also allowed to bathe him. I gave them the opportunity to do so. After the cleansing was complete, we let him sit, because we would then proceed to cleanse the house and property. We sat in the same place where we had prayed before. I arranged the necessary items while my father was smoking. Fortunately, it wasn't a large house otherwise. It would only take more time and energy than it already did. We asked Ingrid to open all the windows and doors of the house, which she did immediately. We started our prayer, which went on for quite a while, and eventually, we felt the air around us change. I had goosebumps all over my body, and I tried not to focus on it, but all sorts of sensations went through me. It felt as if the air pressure around us was changing, as if the oxygen was decreasing, and I was gasping for breath. I knew demons always do this when they know you're there to remove them. They literally pull out all the stops to distract you from your goal. And that's exactly what was happening. Various distractions. There were even moments when I didn't remember words from my prayer or mixed up words. During the prayer, we commanded all entities present to return to where they came from. If they didn't obey, we would banish them to the deepest depths of hell, which even demons don't want. They absolutely dread going to hell, so sometimes the demons leave after some effort, but often they don't. Some make it quite difficult for us and think they can outsmart us. But we were prepared for this too, through years of experience dealing with this kind of riffraff. After we completed the prayer ritual, we stood up and sprinkled blessed liquid throughout the entire space. We started with Jordan's offering room. As I sprinkled the blessed material on Jordan's black magic items, I clearly saw a sort of smoky cloud form as if the items were on fire. The entire space was spiritually cleaned and purified. Then we entered the house and did the same there. In the house, we didn't see anything suspicious that aroused our suspicion. We only smelled a very strong odor, even though no one was present. After we had gone through all the necessary steps for cleansing and successfully completed them, we invited Jordan and his family onto the balcony. Everyone took their seats, and we informed them that all evil was gone. We also placed protection in the ground of the property so that no returning demons could reside there. We did the same for Jordan. He received protection from us so that nothing could enter his body again without permission. Jordan became very emotional. He never thought this moment would come when he would be freed. He didn't know how to thank us and said he felt enlightened. A heavy burden had been lifted from him, and he felt like living again. He kept thanking us with tears in his eyes. We urged him to stay away from black magic, because if he were to start the same bad practices again, we wouldn't help him again. He assured us that he wouldn't do it again. He really didn't want such a curse on himself anymore. I feel like I've lost my power since that liberation. So even if I wanted to start my work again, I couldn't. I'll never do this again. I'm damn happy to be free, Jordan said joyfully. Sherida, the mother, Ingrid, the girlfriend, and Martha, the grandmother, each thanked us personally because they were truly exhausted from the whole situation and had been burdened with this very unpleasant situation for years. Now that it was over, they wanted to show their gratitude. They all thanked us with tears in their eyes. Of course, this touched us deeply that we could help this family who had lived in pain for years, witnessing their son, grandson, and partner engaging in demonic practices. We informed Jordan that he needed to come to us for 7 days because we would go through the aftercare process with him for the necessary spiritual purification so that he wouldn't encounter any more problems in the future. He agreed to this. We decided to take Jordan's spiritual items from the offering room with us. The intention was to clean up that entire space because no one else dared to clean up the items. Now that we were there, we did the cleanup right away. While we were busy cleaning up, Jordan asked us if the demons would still come to attack him and possibly kill him. We assured him that they wouldn't, because the purpose of our work was to prevent all that he was afraid of. We had banished all the demonic entities to a place where they could no longer cause trouble, and we had bound their powers. He shook our hands again, and we could tell he didn't know what to do with himself out of gratitude. After everything was packed up, we left the house. On the way, we stopped at a bridge to throw the black magic items into the flowing water. These items should never be used again to harm others. After we did this, we headed home. When I arrived home, I took a refreshing bath and went to bed because I felt extremely tired. I fell into a deep sleep, and the demons present at the place where we had worked earlier that day appeared to me in my dreams. In the dream, I saw many people. Some had torn clothes, and some had long, curly black hair and looked unkempt. I saw many abnormally ugly-looking entities. It was as if they all wanted to tell me something, but I couldn't understand what it was exactly. At one point, it seemed as if we were in a war. I saw people fighting with each other with swords, guns, daggers, and cannons. As they approached me to harm me, it seemed as if they were forcefully thrown away by something invisible. I saw many houses being burned. many devastating storms, earthquakes, and tsunamis wreaking havoc, washing away all enemies from the earth. This dream told me that we had won the spiritual battle. The next day, when I told my father about this, it turned out he had had a similar dream. Later in the day, Jordan, Ingrid, and his mother, Anna, arrived. Jordan seemed cheerful and looked like a completely new person. It was evident that a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. The smile on his face spoke volumes. He radiated like a reborn person. He said he had slept very well and no longer had to fear going into a trance. Ingrid also said that she could sleep peacefully again after a long time and no longer had to fear that he would do something to her in her sleep. Jordan said he had a strange dream in which he packed his belongings and moved to a new home. He was afraid this meant death, but my father reassured him and said, "No, this is actually a good dream. This is a new beginning for you. You have left all the bad behind, and now a fresh new life awaits you." In a world where the line between reality and nightmare blurs, where unseen forces lurk in the shadows, waiting to strike, one young woman's life was forever changed by the grip of unspeakable terror. Join us as we delve into the chilling depths of a true horror story that defies explanation. A tale of possession, jealousy, and malevolence beyond comprehension. Prepare to witness the unimaginable horrors that unfolded when darkness consumed the soul of an innocent girl. This is not just a story, it's a descent into madness. Welcome to Possessed, a True Horror Story. Are you ready to confront the darkness that lies within? Enjoy. This story takes place in 2020 when I first met my husband, Kevin. It was on a particular day when I went to a party with my mother, Anna, her friend. Her son was celebrating his birthday, and it promised to be a grand affair. Upon arriving at the party, a band was performing, and we could easily join in the festivities. Of course, I first congratulated the birthday boy and Anna, my mother's friend, before politely taking a seat. When the band finished performing, the birthday boy approached us again and shook my hand once more. I was confused because I had already congratulated him, but his mother quickly explained with a smile that he admired ladies like me, tall, slender, and in the prime of life. He continued to look at me hungrily throughout the party, so I was aware that I had caught his attention. However, at the party, I also noticed a very attractive man who came over to introduce himself. His name was Kevin, and he was the cousin of the birthday boy who had been eyeing me so hungrily. There was some discreet flirting during the party, and although I remained composed outwardly, deep down, it did affect me, if I'm honest. After the party, there was a period where I was frequently invited out by Christian, the birthday boy, and his cousin Kevin to do fun things together. For example, if there was a festival or another event, they would ask me to join them. We had already connected on social media, so there was communication between us. After several outings together, the bond between Kevin and me grew stronger and stronger until we eventually decided to continue as a couple. It was an incredibly enjoyable time, and the days flew by. On one day, I was sleeping next to Kevin when I suddenly woke up and saw a boy standing next to my bed. Still groggy with sleep, I thought I was dreaming, but it felt so strange that it left me with an eerie feeling. I turned to look at Kevin, but I couldn't see his face clearly. He looked different and startled. I turned back to where the boy had been standing, but thankfully, he was gone. I fell back asleep and didn't tell anyone about this experience. However, from then on, things started to go downhill, and I began having strange dreams. I often dreamed of encountering small children on the street who would ask me to come home with them. My answer was always no, and at that point, they would become angry and ask me if I wanted to see how ugly they could really be. I had this dream so often that I decided to tell my husband about it. He remained very calm and advised me to keep praying to God, assuring me that everything would be okay. A few weeks later, Kevin's family had a party to which we were invited. Upon arriving at the party, I realized it was a cultural event where people would go into trance-like states and dance. This was something I had no experience with, as my family wanted nothing to do with it. The party looked beautiful, and I enjoyed the music. Kevin's aunt, Raisa, seemed to be an important person in the family, as she was walking around with a bottle. Inside the bottle was some kind of liquid that she would dab onto everyone's hands, one by one, before I saw them spreading it on their necks and taking a sniff. At one point, she came to me, and not wanting to spoil the fun, I did the same. Raisa was in high spirits, dancing around and laughing with everyone. After she had given almost everyone a turn with that liquid on their necks, the music started playing again. Immediately, Raisa went into a deep trance, and almost everyone at the party followed suit. It was truly bizarre, and I must admit, it was mesmerizing to watch. I was genuinely enjoying the music they were playing. While I was watching in amazement at what was happening, I noticed Kevin talking to Christian at the party. Meanwhile, I was extremely thirsty, so I asked Kevin if we could get something to drink. Once at the bar, Kevin ordered drinks, and we lingered behind the bar for a while. I noticed a man standing behind me, holding a green beer bottle. I can't explain it, but the moment that man opened his beer bottle, it made a loud explosion sound. At the same moment that the bottle popped open, I completely lost myself. I started shaking as if I were extremely cold, and it felt like something was taking over my body. My feet were uncontrollably trembling, and I felt weak. I screamed Kevin's name, and he realized something was wrong when I collapsed and fell to the ground. Kevin picked me up, and once I was on my feet again, I started dancing, but not just any dance. It was as if my life depended on it. I didn't get tired, and I just wanted to keep dancing. Even when I could barely breathe and felt like I was suffocating, I had to keep dancing because my body wanted it. Eventually, it felt like I had to hug the birthday boy. I looked around the room and saw him standing there, but because it was so crowded, it felt like I couldn't reach him. I felt a rage building up inside me, and it seemed like I was ready to fight just to get to him as quickly as possible. I pushed through the crowd to reach the birthday boy, and people started screaming, "Get her away from there. Get her away. This is not a normal trance. This is a demon." Kevin came and took me away from the dance floor, placing me somewhere to sit so that I could regain myself. I don't remember everything. It was like a blur to me, but this is what I heard and remembered bits and pieces of. Like a puzzle, I recalled tiny fragments of what had happened that evening. I was completely confused, and this was new to me. I didn't know what to do about it. Kevin kept trying to talk to me and calm me down. He asked me in disbelief, "What's wrong with you? Why are you suddenly going into a trance? What happened?" I tried to explain it to him, but I didn't get a chance to open my mouth because just as I was about to speak, I went into a trance again. This time, I couldn't be restrained. It hit me harder, and I could remember even less and couldn't control anything. I just had to let myself go wherever this entity wanted to take me. I thrashed around so much that I lost a ring that was very dear to me, which Kevin had given me at the beginning of our relationship. In between, I would briefly return to myself and then start crying, searching on my knees for my ring. Kevin tried to comfort me while I cried uncontrollably. Comfortingly, he said, "Don't worry, you'll find it again. And if not, I'll buy you another one, so forget about that thing." Shortly after, I went into a trance again, and it continued like this throughout the party. I was exhausted, but my body wouldn't stop dancing. I kept collapsing, which caused a lot of pain in my body. At one point, an older lady sat next to us and said that something bad was happening. More and more people gathered around, and I noticed that it made me extremely restless. I started screaming that someone was trying to kill me and that I wasn't safe. Apparently, I asked for help when the people around me asked who wanted to kill me. "It's my mother. It's my mother who wants to kill me," I screamed. I heard people panicking, saying that I needed to be taken to a separate room because everyone could see what was happening at the party. Kevin and Christian lifted me up together and took me to a separate room at the party where an aunt, who apparently knew a lot about these things, sat opposite me. She started asking in a threatening tone why I was behaving like this at someone else's party. "You're going home right now," she said, and I remained in that room until I regained myself. At a certain moment, I saw Mrs. Anna passing by, and she looked in my direction. I felt that burning sensation again, and suddenly, I pointed towards her and said something in a strange language to her. Almost immediately afterward, I felt extremely exhausted and tired. I slumped forward with my head down while still sitting on the chair with my eyes closed. Anna went to Kevin. I heard her saying to him, "Take her home. I'll have Robert, her husband, drop you off." But it wasn't as simple as that because I fell into another trance and didn't want to get into the car. All I wanted was to go back and dance at the party. I had to and would dance. With great difficulty, Kevin managed to get me into the car, and together we departed towards our house. Once we arrived home, I had calmed down again. Before getting out of the car, I told Robert, "You need to find my ring for me. I want my ring back." Robert promised to do his best to find the ring. Kevin helped me out of the car, which was difficult because I had almost no strength left in my body. With a lot of hassle, he managed to get me inside our house. And there it happened again. I suddenly went into a trance while I was in the shower. I started stamping my feet in pain and said that I wanted to see my father. It was extremely strange because I have no contact with my father since he left my mother. It was chaotic in the house because I kept repeating that I had to go to my father. My friend didn't know what to do with me, so he promised to take me to my father later in the day. With difficulty, I returned to myself and then fell asleep after making a lot of drama. In the morning hours, Kevin woke me up, thinking that everything was over and I was back to normal. He asked me if I had slept well. I told him that I felt good and especially rested. He decided to go to the store for a bit, and I tidied up the house. In between, I stopped to look in the mirror. Immediately, I felt that I was going into a trance again, which confused me. I wasn't completely myself. It seemed like I was going into a deep trance, and then back to a lesser extent. I started walking back and forth through the house. I was completely disoriented. In one of my lucid moments, I tried to call my boyfriend, but I couldn't do it right away. It was extremely difficult to make a simple phone call. Fortunately, I managed to get Kevin on the line. "I'm not okay. That thing keeps bothering me. I don't know what to do," I told him. He acted immediately, and before I knew it, he was back home. He started talking to me and reassuring me. He helped me bathe. In fact, he did everything because I was not capable of doing so. After he had showered me, he said, "My aunt just called me and said that you need to go to her immediately so she can see what's wrong with you." Okay. We immediately went to Anna's house. We took my daughter with us because we couldn't leave her home alone. The moment I set foot on her property, I immediately collapsed, as if I lost all feeling. Like a rag doll, I fell to the ground. Anna yelled loudly to Kevin and her son Christian, "Pick her up and bring her to the back immediately." They did as she said, and I ended up in the backyard. I sat on a chair and kept asking to see my mother, so Kevin quickly went to get my mother. When my mother arrived, I wanted to fight her and attack her. I was completely out of myself, and nothing I did made sense. I felt an intense hatred towards my mother, and she didn't understand what was happening. "Girl, what's wrong with you?" she asked me. Anna handed my mother a cup with some liquid in it and said, "Sprinkle this on your daughter. Her spirit is angry with you." My mother took the cup and poured the liquid over me. The moment she did, she fell into a deep trance. She collapsed to the ground and began trembling. This was remarkable because neither my mother nor I had any knowledge of cultural practices. It had never happened to her before, and just when I needed her the most, she fell into a trance. Neighbor Anna seemed unaffected, unlike us. She had us completely undress, and eventually, we were left with only thin fabric. We were instructed to take a bath, and while she was preparing the bath, I suddenly started asking about my mother's husband, whose name is Paul. According to the entity possessing me, Paul had to come immediately, so he was reluctantly summoned. When he arrived, I began screaming at him and making various accusations with a lot of aggression. "Can't you see what your mother is doing to us? What kind of devilish family are you from?" I yelled at Paul. Completely bewildered, Paul called his mother to ask if she knew anything about this, and if she had done anything to us. The woman, shocked, replied, "What? No, I know nothing about it. I haven't done anything to those people." Paul then came back to us and tried to talk to my mother. "Karine, can you hear me? Tell me what's wrong with you. Can you hear me?" he asked. She didn't respond. She was still in a trance, lying flat on the ground with tears in her eyes. Like my mother, I was still completely in a trance. Everything was passing me by, and everything I'm telling you now is what I was told, because I didn't experience it myself. Paul took me away to sit elsewhere, where I couldn't see my mother anymore because I still wanted to fight her. The intense hatred I felt hadn't diminished, so I was removed from her vicinity. Suddenly, without any reason, Anna decided that she would no longer help. She alone knew the reason for making this decision. Christian then said to her, "Mom, you can't just leave these people like this. You have to help them." She stood for a while with her mobile phone in her hands and called another woman to come and help with this work. Meanwhile, my mother had somewhat regained her composure. So, Anna assigned her the task of bathing me and explained how it should be done. She gave my mother an egg with the words, "Take this, rub it all over your body, and then crush it while naming different people who may have caused this. The egg will only break when you name the guilty party." My mother did as she was told, but the egg wouldn't break. She kept naming various people she knew, but the egg remained intact. It seemed like the egg would never break, but eventually it suddenly shattered when she mentioned the name of her own mother. When I saw this, I jumped from my chair and went to a table I saw outside. I began to pound on it until it was completely destroyed. Kevin ran to restrain me. My mother also had to bathe with those leaves, and when she finished, she put her clothes back on because she was done. She was allowed to go home. "When you get home, you must not bathe for the rest of the day, remember this," Anna said to my mother. With those words, my mother left for her house. Oblivious, my mother followed the advice of our neighbor and didn't shower for the rest of the day. I was not done bathing yet. On the contrary, Anna added more leaves to the water I was supposed to bathe with. She instructed me to break those leaves one by one with my hands. While I was doing this, another woman suddenly appeared. From the conversation between her and Anna, I understood her name was Bianca. So, she was the woman Anna had called to come and help her. Seeing Bianca again filled me with an enormous sense of anger and hatred. I looked at her as if I wanted to kill her. She noticed and asked me why I was glaring at her so fiercely, and before you knew it, I was back in a trance. Please don't forget to hit the like button if you find this story thrilling. Let's go on with the story. Bianca asked me, "Didn't you go back to your ex-boyfriend? Did you have sex with him?" She did this while my friend was standing right beside me, but I clearly said, "No, I only went back to him when I wasn't with Kevin. Yes, we did have intercourse." Bianca said to Kevin, "She had sex with her ex. Did you know that? While she was with you, she slept with him." Bianca was clearly trying to plant doubts in my husband's mind, even though it wasn't true at all. I didn't understand what her exact purpose was with these statements. But as I kept hearing her repeat the same thing about relations with my ex, I yelled, "No! Before I was with him, I had been with my ex." Bianca lit a cigar and came closer to me. I felt the anger welling up inside me. I couldn't stand her. My feeling of hatred only intensified when Bianca blew cigar smoke in my face. She did this several times while looking me in the eyes. "Open your hand," she said, but I refused. "Open your hand," she repeated. Reluctantly, I opened my hand, and she shook a bit of ash from the cigar into it. The moment the ash fell into my hand, I screamed as if I were on fire. Bianca didn't let up, and then proceeded to draw crosses on my feet, my chest, and my forehead. She began asking all sorts of questions like, "Why are you here? Who sent you?" I continued to refuse to answer her questions. Bianca said, "If you don't want to talk or if you lie to me, I'll burn you. So start talking because I'm not joking around." I immediately answered her because her tone sounded very threatening. "Dirk sent me," I said hastily, without understanding why I suddenly mentioned his name. "Dirk is an ex of mine who has long been out of the picture. Did you enter this body on your own, or did Dirk send you to inhabit Relitza's body?" she asked. "I entered her body on my own," I replied this time. Of course, it was strange because I had just said that Dirk had sent me. But remember, people, I wasn't myself at that moment. I was in a trance. It was something else inside me that was giving those answers. Bianca said sternly, "You will go back where you came from. Otherwise, you will see what I will do to you." I was still in a trance, and I was instructed to walk forward towards the gate and then return. The purpose of this was for the evil spirit inside me to leave my body when I reached the gate. The purpose of this was for the evil spirit inside me to leave my body when I reached the gate. It had to go out through the gate, and I had to walk back without that thing. I did as I was told, and took very strange, large steps towards the gate. Bianca held me as I walked towards the gate. When I walked back, I suddenly felt so tired that I could barely walk. It was as if all my strength had left me. Once I reached the back, I wanted to hug everyone again and looked happy. I didn't know if I had already been freed from that thing that kept putting me in a trance, but I heard that I could go home. Before Kevin and I left, Bianca said, "Take her home and let her eat soup tonight." Upon arriving home, Kevin immediately made soup for me. We sat together in the kitchen, waiting for the soup to be ready. We assumed that everything was over and that we could now continue with our lives as usual. But nothing could be further from the truth, because we thought that my ex, Dirk, was the one who had sent a demon for us. At least, that's how Anna made it seem. The strange thing was that whenever Kevin mentioned my mother's name, I would get goosebumps every time, and it felt like I was getting shocks through my body. We lay down, and I realized that I was still not entirely myself. It was as if I was slightly in a trance, because I couldn't remember some parts of what had just happened. I also clearly felt that I was not in the right state of mind. The only difference this time was that I wasn't acting crazy or saying strange things. I lay there looking at the ceiling and seemed very absent. The next day, we went to Anna's again, and everything seemed normal for a while. Some of Kevin's friends and Christian's friends were there, and we were all sitting outside the house, talking cheerfully. Everything was going well until one of his friends started smoking behind me. Immediately, I went into a trance again and completely lost my way. I screamed loudly that the friend had to leave because he was followed by evil spirits everywhere. Anna stormed outside, took me aside again, placed me on a chair and said, "So you fooled us yesterday, you're still here." I then said, "No, I'm not bad. I'm something good. Didn't you see that the boy left immediately? He really came here with bad intentions." Anna didn't seem to believe any of it. She asked me various questions. Apparently, she didn't like my answers because she said to her sons, "Fetch my broom for me." In hindsight, I understood why Anna wanted her broom. They always beat people with it when a demon is in them. Anna started hitting me with it, saying that I wasn't acting like myself and that I needed to tell her who I was and be honest. But I didn't say anything. When the broom achieved nothing, Anna concluded that it was apparently a demon from my family, and the best solution was for Kevin to simply abandon me. I was still in a trance. She had beaten me badly, and instructed Kevin to put a red cloth in my vagina. Kevin didn't know any better. He followed all the advice his aunt gave him. Of course, he did it with good intentions, thinking it would help me. He also gave me all kinds of nasty drinks to drink that he got from Anna. It was not a pleasant moment for me. This woman put a lot of pressure on me, and I couldn't do anything about it. However, nothing seemed to help, and she decided to ask Christian and Kevin to remove me from the house. She didn't want anything to do with me anymore. They complied obediently, not knowing what to do with the situation. You must understand, Kevin had no malicious intentions and trusted his aunt's experience completely. He wanted help for me. I couldn't open my eyes. I could only cry, scared, confused, and with no idea where to go. I was just standing there, not knowing what would happen to me or what would follow. I fell to the ground, and then Anna sent Kevin to pick me up. He let me sit on a bench. At that moment, my mother called on Kevin's phone. He gave it to me, and my mom asked, "What are you doing on the street?" I heard from Paul, my stepfather, that you were crying on the street. What's wrong? Is everything okay with you? At that moment, I could only cry to my mother and whispered, "No, I'm really not okay." Suddenly, Anna screamed loudly so that my mother could hear. "I got you good. I told you. I would get you good and teach you a good lesson." She also cursed at my mother. But we still didn't understand what was going on with this woman. I wasn't myself, confused, and my mother understood even less what was wrong with Anna. Anna told Kevin, "Take her home and let her sleep on the ground, because that's where she belongs. Underground." When we got home, I couldn't fall asleep. I kept tossing and turning in my bed. Kevin is someone who doesn't give up easily, so he took a Bible and started praying for me. He gave me the Bible to read as well, but every time I tried, my hands and voice started trembling. I immediately went into a trance. The thing inside my body clearly fought against it. It wanted nothing to do with that Bible and didn't want to hear anything from it, let alone read words from it. Despite me going into a trance repeatedly, Kevin continued praying, and eventually, he called his mother. This woman is Roman Catholic and very religious, which is why he called her and explained everything to her. They both started praying for me while the phone was on speaker. It was terrible for me to hear. It felt like hot oil was being poured on me when they were praying. I screamed, and I couldn't handle the words from the Bible. They damn near hurt me. I kept screaming, and I think the whole neighborhood must have heard it. Kevin had decided to take me to my grandparents in the morning because he didn't know what to do with me. Besides, his aunt suddenly reacted unkindly, so he didn't want to take me back there again. He didn't understand why his aunt was reacting that way. Just before we left, my mother came to see how I was doing. Since the day at Anna's, things hadn't been going well for my mother either. She kept going into a trance at home, and because she didn't know what to do, she went to a friend's house. Her friend immediately noticed that something was wrong with my mother. Something had come with my mother from Anna's house, causing my mother not to seem like herself. She looked like a very old woman. Marta rubbed a cultural medicine over my mother's body and then asked what exactly was going on. But just as my mother was about to explain, they heard a very loud bang on the roof of the house. The bang sounded like someone had thrown a large stone on the roof. This sound startled them both, My mother decided to go home that evening and came to me the next morning. Don't forget to hit the like button as we continue with this story. With tears in my eyes, I told her that I was at my end, that I kept going into a trance all the time, and I was completely lost. When she heard that I was going to my grandparents for help, she asked if she should come with us. I said yes, but I couldn't say anything else and just kept crying continuously. I felt exhausted and weak, so during the ride to my grandparents, my head hung limply on my mother's shoulder. When we arrived at my grandparents', I ran to my grandfather and threw myself at his feet. I said to him, "I really don't know what's wrong with me. I'm completely confused. Please help me." My grandfather let me sit on a chair. My mother and Kevin briefed my grandfather on everything, from start to finish. My grandfather, who immediately knew that I was possessed by something dark, looked at me and asked sternly, "Who are you? Tell me who you are." I shook my head and shrugged, indicating that I really didn't know. He repeated the question, and suddenly I said, "I am a good spirit, and I must go back to Anna now." Kevin immediately refused and said that he really wouldn't do that, to take me back to Anna. The thing in my body became quite angry and started raging. My grandfather and mother did their best to calm me down, but they couldn't. I aggressively yelled at Kevin, "So you want to abuse me? You don't want to pay me?" It was clear to my grandfather then, this is a child demon sent to torment you and make your life unbearable. My mother tried to find out who sent this demon for me, but I refused to respond. At their wits' end, my grandfather decided to ask a Haitian man for help. This Haitian was good friends with my uncle, so after a short phone call with my uncle, an appointment was made with the Haitian, and he said we could come over right away because it was urgent. We drove there as quickly as possible, and the man, Mr. Alvin, immediately performed some rituals for me on his property. Only after he did this, I allowed to enter his home. Upon entering his home, we were seated. I had to put on clean clothes, and he began placing a few cards on a table. He had a flat basket, and he asked everyone to put some coins in it. Before everyone had put the money, they had to say what their wish for me was. For example, my recovery. Everyone did this, and then he continued to shuffle the cards while praying. I also saw him mumbling to himself, but of course, I didn't understand any of it. He asked me to pick 3 cards from the deck. I picked 2 jokers and a queen of hearts. Alvin continued, "There is a lot of jealousy at play here. Everything that is happening with this girl has to do with someone who lives very close to you, and it is a woman. It is a woman that this girl knows. This woman sees your daughter almost every day, closely monitors her, and knows everything about her. She wanted to arrange this girl for her son because he has secretly always been in love with her, but she ran off with someone else. Her jealousy drives her to these actions." My mother and Kevin immediately said aloud, "We know who. It's Anna, because she lives nearby. And what you're saying can only be one person. There's no one else Relitza spends so much time with." Mr. Alvin nodded and said that she was indeed the culprit who sent the child demon for me. "This woman is sickly jealous, which is why she went so far as to do this to Relitza. She wants to destroy this girl and doesn't want to see her progress. And she doesn't want her nephew to be happy either. She wanted to ruin this relationship. Your happiness is a thorn in her side. She is not happy about Relitza's relationship with Kevin. Ultimately, the this would end in death. If you had come 2 days later, it would have been too late. That woman wants Relitsa dead. She is seriously after you. The demon in this girl's body is there to destroy her in the short term. That is its only purpose, wreaking havoc and killing. The woman who orchestrated this has a black heart and is thoroughly evil. The Haitian told my family that they had to pay, and then he would undo this demonic work of Anna's. It was a huge amount, and we are not wealthy people, so you can imagine how much money this was for us. People, what that demon did to me in those days was no joke. I looked as if I were already dead. I had become completely pale, as if there was hardly any blood flowing in my veins. Completely thin, I looked gray and dry, not healthy at all. That demon was really finishing me off. I looked like an old woman. There was nothing left to save me but God alone. That's why I kept praying constantly. I didn't stop praying. Miraculously, Kevin and my grandparents managed to gather the money. Apparently, many family members pitched in to make it happen. Once the money was complete, Mr. Alvin immediately went to work to help me. However, it seemed that every time Mr. Alvin did something, the demon would crawl deeper into my body and become even stronger. After performing many rituals, which I will spare you, otherwise, this story will be too long, it finally succeeded in removing the demon from my body. "Send that rotten thing back to the woman who sent it for my child," my mother said to Alvin. Kevin interrupted her and said, "No, it's better not to." I was completely weakened, so I could barely say with a soft voice, "Mom, no, don't let him do that." Mr. Alvin himself also said, "No, leave that evil woman alone. Let Relitsa just get better. If that neighbor passes by your house and sees how healthy Relitsa is, and there's no trouble in sight, she'll wonder how it's possible that she's still alive. But leave her to God." The Haitian gave me some medicines he had made for me and a kind of tea that I had to drink every day, and then I was allowed to go home. My husband cried like a little child, as did my mother, stepfather, my brothers, and sisters when all this was over. It was a stressful time that seemed to have no end, but finally, salvation had come for me. A great relief, thanks to God who made this happen for me. I'm just a young girl who hasn't achieved anything in life yet, and yet, an adult woman was jealous of me. Why? Why on earth? I don't understand why she's jealous of me. Of all people to be jealous of. She's jealous of a young girl with nothing. On the contrary, she has more than I do. I can't answer this question, but I have learned my lesson that there are also such people. You don't have to have done anything to them, but they still want you dead. Your existence is such a thorn in their life without you being aware of it. After this ordeal was over, I continued to pray every day because I was terribly afraid that something would happen to me again. Because of this reason, I also didn't dare to look in mirrors anymore, afraid that I would suddenly go into a trance again as before. I stayed with my grandfather for a while, then lived with my father-in-law for several months. By that time, I had low energy and my menstruation was absent. When I visited the doctor, I found out that I was pregnant. I was quite weak and was admitted, especially because this was the beginning of the pregnancy, so the doctor wanted to keep a close eye on me. Gradually, I became a bit more like myself. My health improved in leaps and bounds because I got rest in the hospital. But because of my traumatic experience, the fear of looking in mirrors remained. I also didn't dare to listen to cultural music, afraid that I would go into a trance again. I still cry a lot. Sometimes I'm fine for a while, but then suddenly I have unexpected crying fits. Anna's incident has deeply scarred me mentally. I've lost faith in humanity. Meanwhile, months have passed, and I have given birth to a daughter. Now, I have 2 beautiful children. They are my pride. I pray daily. I constantly talk to God to protect me. And I hope that one day I will be myself again. By the way, we never found that red cloth that was inserted into my vagina. It simply disappeared completely.
Welcome to Black Horror Stories, where the shadows tell stories that are not for the faint-hearted. Tonight, we explore 3 terrifying tales that remind us that the unseen world can be far more dangerous than we think. From a ghostly little girl in the park, to a demonic funeral procession, and finally to the haunting encounters in a pension room, these stories will make you question what's real. Sit back, turn off the lights, and join us as we delve into the darkness. But beware, once you step into these stories, you might not be able to find your way back. Story 1, The Little Girl in the Park. A few years ago, there was a festival in the heart of the city. It was a major event, with artists from the US and Trinidad coming to perform. Local artists were also set to take the stage. My girlfriend and I were getting ready to head out to the festival. But first, we had to make a few stops along the way to grab some food. It was already late, so we found parking behind the president's office. A man approached us, one of those streets parking attendants, offering to keep an eye on our car for a small fee of $20. I paid half up front, and the rest would be due when we picked up the car. No problem, we thought. The parking spot was close to Independence Square, so we wouldn't have to walk too far when the festival ended. We decided to take a walk through the nearby park before heading to the square, as there were activities happening there too. My girlfriend noticed a young girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, sitting alone on a bench. She was petite with a delicate frame. There were no adults around, which seemed strange, so we approached her. My girlfriend asked, "What are you doing here alone? Where are your parents? Aren't you afraid to be by yourself in this crowd?" The girl seemed unimpressed and casually replied, "Oh, my mom just went to get some milk. I'm waiting for her." My girlfriend and I exchanged puzzled glances. We weren't sure what to do, stay with her or mind our own business. The girl didn't seem scared, so we assumed she was used to waiting for her mother. There was no sign of panic or fear in her demeanor. "Let's go, or we'll miss the activities. Her mom will be back soon," my girlfriend urged. I tried to get more information from the girl, asking for her name. "Shally," she said. "Nice name," I replied, trying to reassure her. "Remember, don't go anywhere with strangers. Just wait for your mom, okay?" She nodded and we walked away. As we entered the park, my girlfriend, a little tipsy from the beer and wine, questioned why a mother would leave such a young child alone in a crowded place. "Some people shouldn't be mothers," she grumbled. I glanced back at the spot where we had seen the girl, but she was gone. "Her mom must have picked her up," I said. We hadn't walked far, so it seemed odd that the girl had disappeared so quickly. My girlfriend suggested we loop back to check if the girl was still there, just to make sure everything was okay. We returned to the spot, but there was no sign of her. We approached a guardhouse nearby and asked if anyone had seen a little girl. The guards said they hadn't seen any child in that area. "We saw you talking there when you entered the park, but we thought you were talking to each other," one of the guards said. They seemed confident that there had been no girl sitting there. I started to sweat. I knew I wasn't drunk. I hadn't had anything to drink. My girlfriend got annoyed and said, "Forget it, let's get out of here." We headed back toward the president's office, but I kept looking around, hoping to see the girl. But she was nowhere to be found. Back at the festival, the crowd was thick, and we spent a long time pushing through the throng to get inside. It was getting dark, but the atmosphere was lively. I almost forgot about the incident with the girl. Eventually, the drinks and water ran out, so I went to the bar to replenish our stock. And that's when I saw her again, the little girl Shally, hiding by the bar. I approached her and asked what she was doing there. She said she was looking for her mother. I crouched down to talk to her, and everyone walked past us without even noticing her. "Wait here," I said. "I'll get some water for my friends, then we'll look for your mom." I headed back to my friends, planning to tell them I'd found the girl and would help her find her mother. But I knew my girlfriend wouldn't be interested in helping, so I kept it to myself. I returned to the girl, took her cold hand, and let her out. We walked past the president's office and toward my car, where I had some food. The parking attendant ran up to me, asking if I was leaving. I said, "No, I'm just grabbing some food from my car." I took some food from the back seat and gave it to the girl. She ate hungrily and asked for a drink. "I don't have any drinks here," I said. "Wait here and I'll buy some water nearby." I left the girl at the car, asking the parking attendant to keep an eye on her while I got the water. He looked at me strangely, but I didn't pay much attention. I hurried to get some water and returned to the car, but the girl was gone. I asked the parking attendant why he hadn't watched the girl. He looked at me with a puzzled expression and asked, "What girl? I didn't see any girl here." I insisted that I had brought a girl with me, but he kept saying, "You came alone, ma'am." I was confused and angry. How could you not see the girl? I was holding her hand. But he was adamant that there had been no girl with me. He then mentioned that the area had a strange history and advised me not to talk too much about things I might see. I explained what had happened, but he seemed uneasy. He warned me that whatever I had seen might not have been human, and that it was good I had fed it, or it might have followed me home. I was unsettled but tried to calm down. My colleague came looking for me at the parking lot, and I pretended everything was fine. I said I was just having a chat with the parking attendant. On the way back, my girlfriend wanted to stop at KFC. As we passed the bridge, I saw a group of people crossing, and among them was a little girl. She had a sinister grin on her face. It wasn't a friendly smile, it was cold and chilling. She greeted me as if she'd been waiting for me, and I knew then that this was no ordinary child. I prayed silently as I drove away. Luckily, nothing happened to me or my girlfriend, but the next day I had a high fever. It took a week to recover. I never saw the girl again, but her sinister smile haunted my dreams for a long time. Story 2, The Deadly Funeral, When Curiosity Turns Fatal. It was a public holiday in our beautiful country, and I was with some buddies from the neighborhood heading into the city to party. After celebrating, we were walking home as a group around 3 a.m. We were having a great time, laughing, cracking jokes, and generally having fun. As we walked down the street, we approached the corner nearby our home where there are 2 cemeteries. All of us suddenly stopped laughing and making noise. Why? Because in the distance we heard singing and what sounded like a crowd approaching. Funeral songs echoed through the quiet night. We checked our watches. It was exactly 3:40 a.m. We were startled by the loud singing and the clear noise of a crowd, but we couldn't see where it was coming from. We didn't know what to think, so we figured there must be a ritual or something happening somewhere nearby. We tried not to dwell on it and hurried on our way home. The singing continued, so we turned toward the sound. This time, we saw a massive funeral procession entering the cemetery. At first, we couldn't see anyone. Then suddenly, there was a huge procession. This was unusual because funeral processions don't happen at 3:40 in the morning. We knew something wasn't right. In a panic, we ran home as fast as we could. Once home, I knocked loudly on the front door. My grandmother woke up and opened the door for me. As soon as I got inside, she said, "Good that you made it home safely. I had a strange dream about you." I nervously told her about everything that had happened. "Take off your clothes and throw them on the trash heap where we burn garbage," she said. Then she fetched some holy water and dabbed it on my neck and face. Afterward, she had me enter the house backward. I slept soundly that night. The next day, one of my friends got sick. We were a group of 4 that night, so I went to gather the other 2 friends to visit our sick buddy. The others hadn't gotten sick. Maybe their parents or spiritual healers had helped them. I didn't ask. When we got to our sick friend's house, he told us, "After you guys went home, I went back on my scooter to see what was happening at the cemetery. Just out of curiosity, but I stayed at a safe distance so they couldn't see me. I saw them dancing with a coffin. There was a huge crowd, and the procession kept singing and dancing for a long time. We listened to him, then chatted as if nothing had happened. The next day, we got the devastating news that he had died. Our friend was gone. I was devastated, so I told my grandmother about it, and she explained that it was no ordinary funeral procession, especially not at 3:40 a.m. It was a demonic funeral, a supernatural funeral procession. That's why my friend died. His curiosity got the better of him. He should have known better and stayed away, especially from something so strange. If he had just gone home, it would never have ended this way. Let this be a lesson to those who are overly curious. Not everything is meant for us to see. Stay in your home if you can, and don't meddle in things that don't concern you. Story 3. Ghostly Encounter in a Pension Room. About 3 weeks ago, my boyfriend and I went to a pension to spend some quality time together. After having a playful evening, we lay in bed chatting and cuddling. Later, he fell asleep, but I just couldn't seem to fall asleep, even though I was tired from our playful activities. I kept tossing and turning in bed, trying to find a comfortable position, but I just couldn't fall asleep. Then suddenly I saw 2 dark figures enter the room. The room was dimly lit, so I couldn't tell where these people came from, but they were just standing there in our room. It was a man and a woman. Initially, I thought they might be cleaning staff because they casually strolled into the room, seemingly unaware that we were there. I figured they thought the room was empty and came to clean it for the next guests. But I quickly realized something was off because I hadn't heard the door open, and it was locked, so there was no way for cleaners to get in. Also, these people didn't turn on the lights, which struck me as odd. They moved closer to the bed where my boyfriend and I were lying. It was like they didn't even notice us, as if our presence didn't concern them at all. Despite my confusion, I still thought they were cleaners, though they didn't behave like it. Then I saw that they weren't wearing any clothes. They were completely naked. Suddenly, they started passionately kissing and having sex right in front of me. I was utterly confused, thinking they had stumbled into the wrong room by mistake, or were so lost in their passion that they didn't realize they were in the wrong place. Let me be clear, they didn't look like ghosts. They looked like regular people, not transparent or anything like that. I tried to turn to my boyfriend to wake him up, hoping he could make sense of this weird situation. But my body wouldn't cooperate. I couldn't move, as if I was paralyzed, and I couldn't scream either. It was the scariest feeling I've ever experienced. While the couple continued their intimate activities, I felt completely helpless. Then I remembered to pray and call upon God's name. Even though I couldn't speak, I started to repeat God's name in my head. After what felt like an eternity, I began to feel some sensation in my legs, and I kicked my boyfriend with all the strength I could muster to wake him up. He woke up looking sleepy and confused and asked me what was wrong. I turned to point out the couple, but they were gone, vanished without a trace. It was like they were never there. I immediately told my boyfriend that I kicked him by accident, as I didn't know how to explain what had just happened, fearing he might think I was imagining things. I quickly got up to take a shower. While I was in the shower, I still felt uneasy and nervous. My heart was pounding, and I couldn't shake the images of the couple from my mind. When I returned to the room, I saw my boyfriend sitting up in bed, looking at me with a strange expression. He said, "I think I saw something weird. 2 people were standing right next to the bed." His words made my stomach churn and my pulse quicken. The couple had returned, but this time it seemed like my boyfriend saw them too. Before I could respond, we heard whispering. It sounded like voices, but we couldn't make out what they were saying. My boyfriend looked toward the corner of the room where the whispers were coming from, and his face turned pale as a sheet. He grabbed my hand and whispered, "They're here again, and they're watching us." Suddenly, the whispers grew louder, filling the room with an eerie resonance. The couple, who had vanished earlier, now reappeared. But this time, they were not merely spectators. They were pointing at us, and their gestures became more urgent and menacing. It was as if they were signaling for us to join them, to follow them into whatever realm they came from. Panic gripped me as the couple started to move toward us. their expressions devoid of any emotion. My boyfriend squeezed my hand, and we both felt a chilling coldness creeping over us. The couple's whispers grew louder, turning into a haunting chant that echoed through the room. We knew we had to leave, but our bodies felt heavy and sluggish, as if some unseen force was holding us down. The couple was closing in, and it felt like we were being pulled into their world. I tried to scream, but my voice was gone, replaced by the incessant chant that seemed to surround us. In a final burst of strength, my boyfriend grabbed my arm and yanked me toward the door. We stumbled out of the room, slamming the door behind us. The chanting stopped abruptly, but the feeling of dread lingered. We didn't look back as we ran down the hallway, desperate to escape the ghosts that wanted to take us with them. That night, we never returned to the pension. We knew we had narrowly escaped being dragged into a world where we didn't belong. From that moment on, we understood that some things are better left unseen, and that curiosity can be a deadly temptation.
In the dead of night, under the cloak of darkness, a young couple unknowingly ventures into a forbidden realm. Little do they realize, their innocent curiosity will unleash a malevolent force, opening a gateway to untold horrors. Within these cursed grounds, secrets fester in the shadows, darker than the deepest pits of hell. Brace yourself for Graveyard Encounter, a spine-chilling saga based on real-life nightmares, exclusively from Black Horror Stories. Get ready to be consumed by terror as we plunge into the abyss of the unknown. Enjoy, if you dare. Dear viewers of Black Horror Stories, my name is Sabrina, and I am here to share with you the story of what happened to me when I was just 19 years old. Through this tale, I hope to teach you to watch out with choices in life. Sometimes, an exciting choice can turn out to be a deadly one. Why do I say this? You will soon find out in my story. Please leave a like and a comment so my story can go viral. At the age of 19, I was offered a job by my mother's friend. My mother's friend, Ingrid, was married to a wealthy businessman named Mark. Together, they had 3 children named Gordon, Marvin, and Shannon. Shannon and I had been best friends since childhood, and so it was through her that I was asked if I was looking for a summer job. Her mother needed a maid for the family, and I would be well paid for it. My family didn't have much money, so I was thrilled to be able to contribute by finally getting a job. Shannon and I became friends because of our mother's friendship, so my mother had no issues with me working for Mrs. Ingrid. She was indeed a very pleasant woman. Everything happened very quickly. I received the offer on Sunday morning and was already working for the Baker family by Monday morning. The first week flew by. I did many standard chores that I did at home, only this time I was getting paid for it. My friend Shannon often helped me, so I would finish my tasks within a few hours, leaving us free to do as we pleased. The first 2 weeks passed, and then Shannon informed me that her brother Gordon, who lived in America, was coming to visit us for the holidays. I had seen Gordon once before when I was younger, but I couldn't remember him at all. I had no idea what he looked like now. Shannon's mother also informed me of Gordon's arrival, and that they would be organizing a welcome party, so she would need my extra help around the house. Shannon wanted me to stay overnight on the day of the welcome party because it would be quite busy, and no one would be able to drop me home. It was Friday morning, and Gordon had arrived. At that moment, I wasn't at home with Shannon's family. I was supposed to be there the next morning, but but I had overslept terribly. I was supposed to be there by 9 a.m., but I didn't arrive until 12 p.m. Mrs. Ingrid didn't mind, but Shannon was very upset because I was supposed to go shopping with her and her brother Gordon in the city. I had apparently ruined her plans, so she ignored me the whole day. I felt guilty, but decided to give her some space. She would eventually come around. After all, I had apologized. By late afternoon, I saw a luxury car stop in front of the house. Even though it wasn't my visitor, I decided to walk to the gate to see who it was. I was secretly curious about Shannon's brother because he was highly praised by his parents and sister. He was said to have a good job and be a very decent young man. I tried to discreetly observe what they were doing, and the gentleman got out of the car and chatted for a while near the car. At one point, they started walking towards me, towards the front door of the house, and 3 out of the 4 boys politely greeted me, but one looked at me with an arrogant gaze and said nothing, as if I was beneath him to greet. But dear viewers of Black Horror, I don't know how it happened, but I found that incredibly sexy. He looked at me with such a dominant look. It made me feel all hot. By now, I was 19 and only recently sexually active, so I'll be honest, I got excited quickly. I didn't know who Gordon was, but all 4 gentlemen looked good and had well-trained bodies. For a 19-year-old girl, it felt like I had stumbled into heaven for women. Would I have these handsome gentlemen around me all the time from now on? I became very nervous because all sorts of naughty thoughts ran through my head now that I had seen these handsome young men. They also smelled so good, like expensive cologne. They were already inside the house, and I could still smell their scent. Lost in thought, I lingered outside for a while, pretending to be on the phone, and then walked inside. I saw 3 of those boys sitting in the living room. I didn't know where the 4th boy was, but I didn't care. When I entered the house, they all glanced at me for a moment, but then continued their conversation. I felt a little awkward, so I quickly ran upstairs. I wanted to hide in Shannon's room away from all those attractive boys. Their presence made me very nervous. I gently pushed open Shannon's bedroom door and saw her talking to that arrogant boy. Oh, so he's Gordon, immediately came to mind. Of course, I hadn't recognized him. I didn't know which of those handsome boys Gordon was. And now, it turned out that the arrogant treat was indeed Gordon. Honestly, in my opinion, he was also just the cutest of all 4 gentlemen. Shannon and Gordon were talking about his girlfriend in America, and I managed to catch a bit of their conversation because they didn't notice me entering the room. When Gordon saw me, he immediately stopped talking about his girlfriend and said with a grin on his face, "Wow, and who's this? Is this Mrs. Rachel's daughter?" Nervously, I didn't know how quickly to respond, and I said hesitantly, Yes, that's right." Gordon said, "Oh, I thought so. I barely recognized you. You've grown quite a bit. Looking good, by the way." I didn't say anything more, but just sat there, shyly smiling. Gordon looked at me, laughing. He seemed to enjoy my shyness. He told Shannon that he was going downstairs and would talk to her later because his friends were still downstairs in the living room. He nodded at me and left the bedroom. I was literally swooning there and sniffed his scent, which lingered in the room. The day went on, and tomorrow would be Gordon's welcome party. We decorated the house together, and when I was done, it was time to go home. Mrs. Ingrid instructed Gordon to give me a lift to a bus stop so I could easily get home. She gave him the keys to one of the cars and said to me, "It's late already, so will you call us once you've safely arrived home?" I nodded politely and said that I would certainly do that. Shannon and Marvin came to ask if they could also come with us to drop me off at the bus stop. Before Mrs. Ingrid could say anything, Gordon hurried to answer, "No, no one can come, because I won't be coming straight home. I'll drop her off and then head to my friends." Shannon and Marvin frowned, clearly upset. Secretly, I was somewhat relieved that I would be alone with Gordon in the car for a while. At the same time, it made me quite nervous, excited, and enthusiastic. Once in the car, he jokingly said to me, "Why don't you come sit up front next to me? I'm not a taxi, you know." I said, "Okay, no problem." That was exactly what I wanted, which is why I had deliberately sat in the back. I hoped he would ask me to sit next to him, and he did just that. We drove towards the bus stops where I was supposed to catch a bus home, but I noticed that Gordon just kept driving past without stopping at the buses. He saw me looking confused, and before I could say anything, he laughed. "Why are you looking like you're confused? Don't worry, I'll safely take you home. Isn't it unsafe for a girl to be out alone on the streets so late?" I said, "Thank you, but I would manage." We passed by a McDonald's when Gordon stopped to get some food for both of us. We stayed in the car in the parking lot to eat and started talking. It was fun, as if we had known each other for years. He kept complimenting me on how beautiful and sexy I was. At one point, he touched my face and gently pulled me towards him, saying, "I have a girlfriend in America, but would you like to have fun with me here? Would you want to have a secret relationship with me without anyone knowing?" I was too excited to even open my mouth out of arousal, afraid I would blurt out something crazy in my excitement. So, while Gordon kept saying sweet words to me, I hardly answered and just sat there shyly laughing. He started playing with my hair again, and suddenly, he kissed me. I responded to his kiss eagerly. I had been longing for this. It felt like I was going crazy with arousal. The desire in me had been bubbling for this boy, and I wanted more than just a kiss. So when his lips touched mine, it was more fiery than ever before. He probably didn't expect that from me, as I had been withdrawn all this time. And now suddenly, he saw a different side of me. He seemed to find that exciting, because he whispered in my ear, "I really like you. I want you. Ever since I saw pictures of you with my sister, I wanted you." People, I don't need to tell you how this went further, because you can already guess. Gordon wanted to have sex with me. He made that clear to me. I wanted nothing more than that. I wanted him deep inside me. The kinkiest and nastiest thoughts raced through my head. Yes, I wanted him entirely. I wanted to feel everything of him inside me. He made me hornier than horny. I had never felt so aroused and out of control for a boy. He could tell I was ready, and I told him I wanted what he wanted, looking deeply into his eyes. Gordon drove to an abandoned spot nearby and parked there. We were somewhere in an area with a lot of woods, and we both didn't exactly know where we were, but that didn't matter to us. We wanted each other, and we were ready to let it happen in the car. It started with a kiss, and we moved together to the back seat, where Gordon did a fantastic job. He put me in all kinds of positions, and it seemed to last for hours. They were hours full of pleasure, and I couldn't get enough. Because we were in the woods, we could let ourselves go, and I could make quite a bit of noise. At one point, Gordon turned me around and told me to lean against the car. And so we got out, and he leaned me over the car. It was delightful, people. I enjoyed it. And when I say I enjoyed it, I really mean that I was in seventh heaven. Gordon was tall and strong, and I felt his strong hands holding me while he was busy. Suddenly, we heard a noise coming from the bushes, and we thought we were being caught. We quickly put on our clothes and laughed as we drove away from this spot. In the car, we laughed together, and I even said that I hoped no one had secretly taken photos of us while we were so intensely engaged. Gordon said he wasn't worried about that and gave me a soft kiss on my forehead as he held his hand on the steering wheel, driving on confidently. I was completely in love and could already see myself marrying this boy. Once I arrived home, I got out and went inside with a big smile on my face. After a lovely shower, I went to bed and realized that I didn't have his number. This was strange because he hadn't asked for my number either. How did he expect to have a secret relationship with me? The next morning, I got up extra early because I wanted to make myself look beautiful before going to work. I arrived around 9 a.m. and saw Gordon sitting by the window in the distance. I immediately became happy and thought he had been waiting for me, which is why he was sitting by the window. Unfortunately, at that moment, I was immediately brought back to reality. Gordon looked at me coldly and once again didn't greet me. I was shocked because I hadn't expected this. The party had already started, and it turned out that it wasn't just a welcome party for Gordon, but also the opening of a new company by Mr. Mark. Because of this, it was incredibly busy, and only wealthy and successful people came to the party, many of whom I had seen on TV or in the media. So it was very impressive to me. I tried to provoke Gordon and hoped for a reaction, so I sat with his friends, who were also at the party. They started chatting with me as if they had known me for years. They were also flirting with me, telling me how sexy and delicious they found me, which was, of course, fun. I tried to chat along and join in with the guys' jokes, hoping Gordon would get jealous. But nowhere did I see any emotion on his face. He didn't even look at me. I felt bad and used by his behavior. It was a secret, so I couldn't discuss it with anyone. By midnight, I was tired from the long day, so I decided to go to Shannon's room and fell asleep there. Around 5 o'clock in the morning, I woke up because I was thirsty and decided to go to the kitchen to get a drink. I saw Gordon sitting in the huge living room, still in his party clothes, smoking a cigarette. He seemed to be the only one still awake. Contrary to what I expected, he called me to sit with him. "Come, sit with me," he said. I pretended not to hear him and hurried to the fridge to pour myself a drink and quickly drank it. I lingered in the kitchen for a while, and Gordon came up to me. I noticed that Gordon was acting a little strange. He spoke differently and didn't look as good as usual. Maybe he had partied too hard tonight, I thought. Strangely, he looked kind of ugly, tired, and worn out in a way. I don't know how to explain this, but I almost didn't recognize him from how bad he looked. Abnormally dark circles around his eyes, and his skin seemed extremely pale, unhealthy pale. He almost looked like a sitting corpse, crossed my mind. He looked so unrefreshed. He also spoke as if he wasn't himself, He was struggling with his words, only saying strange things that I didn't understand. Maybe he had had too much strong drink, so before he did anything strange, I quickly ran upstairs and went back to lie down next to Shannon until I fell asleep. When I woke up the next morning, a lot was happening in the house. Gordon had gotten so sick last night that his family had taken him to the hospital, and he was immediately admitted. Later on, I heard from Shannon that he was really not doing well. He was getting worse by the day. His health didn't improve, and the doctor couldn't find out what was wrong with him. Gordon had a high fever all the time. He couldn't eat because he vomited everything back up immediately. So eventually, he didn't even want to eat, resulting in him losing a lot of weight. He could hardly speak. He was so weak. Bad news indeed. But there were also days when Shannon would come back from the hospital with her parents, and she would tell me that Gordon was doing better. She would be a little happier then, but on other days, she would be silent and withdrawn. When it became clear that the family was going to the hospital more and more often, and I heard Shannon's mother crying loudly in her bedroom, I knew it was much more serious than I had thought. Shannon had asked me a few times if I wanted to go with them to the hospital, but I refused. I was afraid of how he would look, also afraid of my own emotions towards him. I felt so much for this boy that I almost knew I loved him more than myself. I would burst into tears there, and everyone would find it strange. As Shannon told me, he looked really alarmingly bad by now. So I didn't want to take a chance to go there and act dramatically. After all, Gordon had asked me to keep everything secret between us. He had his girlfriend in America, and this really couldn't leak out what was between us. Ultimately, I decided to go to the hospital anyway. When I saw him, I was shocked. He did indeed look terribly bad. I couldn't recognize that boy anymore. He looked like a skeleton. He looked weak. He could hardly breathe, but tried to say something to me. All he could say with difficulty was, "Graveyard." I heard him say it clearly, and so did the others present there. Kevin, a friend of Gordon who was also there, who heard Gordon say, "Graveyard," came up with the idea to take him to a voodoo priest. If the doctors still can't find anything and can't help him, let's look for outside help for him, he said. The next day, Gordon's parents managed with difficulty to get the doctor to discharge their son from the hospital. He wasn't doing well, so the doctor didn't want him to go home, but the parents stuck to their decision. So Gordon was allowed to go home. I didn't know that there would really be an effort made to take Gordon to the priest until Shannon called me and told me they would pick me up at home. I was nervous and afraid. What? I had to go? Why then? What does this have to do with me? I was picked up and sat in the car with Shannon's family, and in the other car that followed us were Gordon and his friends. No one spoke to me in the car. No one said anything about me, so I was quite relieved. I still wondered why they came to pick me up. Nothing was said about it, because everyone sat silently in the car, and no one brought clarity to what I was wondering. It was over an hour's drive when we arrived at the voodoo priest's camp. I stayed by the car because I was very nervous when Shannon took my hand and said, "Come on. The priest called late last night that you had to be there." I looked at her in shock. Huh? How? How does he know me? Why is he asking for me? I thought. The whole group entered the hut of the voodoo priest. But the moment I entered the hut, The voodoo priest immediately looked at me with a fierce look. "Are you Shannon's friend?" he asked. But the way he said it, he already knew who I was. I said softly, "Yes, that's me." He looked at me angrily and asked if I had a relationship with Gordon. I looked shocked and decided to lie. So I said, "We didn't have a relationship." I said I hardly knew Gordon because he had just come on vacation. The voodoo priest stood up and shouted that he couldn't help if we were lying. "Why are you lying, girl?" he said angrily to me. "I know you had a relationship, and I know you had sex. Tell us the truth now. You had sex on a grave. You have no respect for the dead. Shame on you." People, I didn't know what was happening. I had never had sex on a grave. What nonsense was this man saying? I only received dirty looks from Gordon's friends and family, as if I was filthy in their eyes. Because of me, their son was now seriously ill, and he couldn't get better. They hadn't expected this from me, that I would have sex with their son. I still didn't understand how it was my fault that he was sick. I was completely confused. Even Shannon looked at me with one of the dirtiest looks. She hadn't expected this from me, and I saw the disappointment in her eyes. She always told me her deepest secrets, and I hadn't done the same. I felt like a traitor and a failure. She was right to be disgusted with me, because I hadn't been a good friend to her. I realized that even though it was never my intention to hurt her, I didn't want to hurt Gordon either. He meant everything to me. The priest spoke to a leaf, and I had to spit on it while having a palm leaf in my mouth. And Gordon had to do the same thing with great difficulty. Then numerous rituals were performed, and prayers were said for us. He also gave us a bath with leaves. After we had gone through all the rituals, the priest said sternly to us, "You would have died because that woman buried there, she was not an easy woman. She was a very bad woman, and her soul does not rest. Her soul is just as bad, full of resentment and hatred. She only wants revenge on anyone who crosses her path. And you went to have sex on her grave, so she wanted revenge on both of you. One by one, you would get sick and die. That boy would die first, and then it would be your turn. If you hadn't come here in time, it would have been over for both of you." Naturally, I was shocked by everything I heard, and Gordon's family was also shocked by this information. They still looked at me with disdainful and dirty looks. They seemed really confused that I had sex with Gordon, even though he had a girlfriend in America. They hadn't expected it from me either, because I'm always shy and quiet. The fact that I, of all people, had had sex with their son brother, and on a graveyard, was really not pleasant for them to hear. In hindsight, it turned out that the night when Gordon and I had sex in a dark wooded area, there must have been a grave somewhere there. We obviously didn't know that, because it was probably an old grave without a headstone, and had a lot of grass forest covering it or something. The fact is, we didn't see anything resembling a grave, so when we had sex, it was unknowingly on someone's grave. It was just too dark there. We didn't know that place at all, but the need was great for us. We thought we had found a nice private spot in a remote, deserted alley. But this adventure could have been our death if we hadn't gone to the priest in time. Personally, I would never have thought of seeking a solution from a voodoo priest, so I'm glad Kevin, Gordon's friend, came up with the idea afterward. Otherwise, Gordon would not be alive now, and maybe neither would I. After this incident, Gordon's parents gradually forgave me. Everyone makes mistakes. You're still young, and sometimes you don't use your brains. The hormones of teenagers these days are really off the roof, said Shannon's mother. She was also quite angry with Gordon because he was just as wrong to have sex with me, even though he was in a relationship. She really couldn't accept that. She hadn't raised him like that. Just go and have sex in a deserted place that you don't even know. Anything could have happened. It could have really gone wrong. I'm really disappointed in both of you, she said. The family was really scared by all of this because Gordon was their darling, and they thought they were almost losing him. Fortunately, it didn't come to that. Gordon told me that during his illness, he thought I had made him sick, that there was something wrong with my body, and that was why he got so sick. Because during sex, he saw a handprint on the car window. He didn't think about it at the time because he was in the heat of the moment. It was only later, when he was so sick, that he thought I was the one with a cultural problem. And that was also the reason he distanced himself from me, because he felt dirty and disgusted with me since we had sex. He also kept dreaming about a graveyard, but didn't know why. But it wasn't my fault. He also realized that when we went to the priest, it was the spirit of that bad woman who made him so sick and played with his mind. She also gave him dark thoughts about me and was slowly killing him. That evil spirit was literally sucking the life out of him. After this incident, I had a very short relationship with Gordon, but it didn't work out between us. He thought we should just remain friends, given how everything had gone. The disappointment of his parents affected him deeply. Plus, he had drama with his girlfriend in America, who found out everything. Ultimately, staying friends with Gordon and me didn't lead to anything. I still love him dearly, but I'm at peace with it. It was too good to be true. He was out of my league. A handsome boy like Gordon would never stay with a simple girl like me. Hopefully, this is a lesson for those who like to have sex in strange places. Watch out, because you never know what you might bring from the place. In our case, it almost ended us. Welcome to this new story. Before we dive into today's story, we want to give a brief content warning. This story contains intense and sensitive themes, including violence, black magic, and family conflict. Some listeners might find these topics distressing, so please exercise discretion while listening. In today's episode, you'll hear about a family torn apart by dark secrets and betrayals, where even the closest relationships are poisoned by deceit and supernatural influences. The story reveals a daughter's struggle to understand her father's decisions and the tragic outcomes of his choices. Thank you for joining us, and let's get into the story. I'm a teenager going to school, a girl with a heavy heart. My life went completely wrong from the moment I was born. My parents split up in a big fight. Dad wanted a divorce, and he wanted to have me. Mom had no one. She felt lonely and lost without me. At a certain point, she couldn't handle the sorrow anymore. She committed suicide, leaving Dad a widower. He might have won, you could say, but who lost? Me, of course. I was the big loser, because by doing so, he took away my mother. I was barely 2 years old when this happened, losing my mom. Years passed, Dad worked, and I stayed more with Grandma Rochelle, my father's mother. I always thought of Grandma Rochelle as a bad mother. She was always very hateful, strict, and mean to me. And I felt she partly caused my mom's death. When Dad wasn't home, Grandma Rochelle yelled at me for every little thing. She always seemed irritated with me. I could feel she didn't like me, and she often hit me for no reason. But when my father was around, she was always sweet as pie. Years passed since my mother's death. My father's parents, Grandpa Kishan and Grandma Rochelle, pressured him to marry someone else. My grandparents had already chosen a woman for him. According to them, she was suitable for him, and she would make him happy again. That lady's name was Joya, and she was unkind to me. I had hoped she would be a kind person and be good to me, but that wasn't the case at all. Shortly after my father married Joya, Grandpa and Grandma died in a car accident. It turned out that it was because of black magic from Joya. She wanted to get rid of anyone in her way. When Grandma Rochelle died, I was relieved and happy because my grandmother had caused a lot of misery and sorrow between my father and mother. Grandma Rochelle always incited my father against my mother. She was incredibly mean to my mother and did everything to make her life unbearable. Occasionally, my father told me about it because I was too young to experience these low things when my grandmother did them. That Joya had gotten rid of her now with her black magic was just her own karma. After all, it was my grandmother's own choice to bring Joya into the house. And it was precisely because of this girl that she lost her life. Joya not only got rid of my grandparents, but also got rid of my father with her black magic. He died under strange circumstances shortly after his parents' accident. This couldn't be a coincidence. She was clearly after the family's possessions. She literally went over bodies to achieve her goals. She was ruthless, cold-blooded, and I was afraid of her. You could see she was a mean person. There was still one uncle, a brother of my father, in my grandparents' house. Uncle Rakesh was a kind uncle, and he was an educated man who could talk fluently about all subjects. But he too was manipulated by Joya with black magic. Uncle Rakesh went crazy from one day to the next. He started wandering around the waterfront and slept there on the benches. I was left alone in the house with my mean stepmother, who didn't even care about me. One day, Joya suddenly brought her new boyfriend, Dinesh, into the house. Dinesh was terribly violent when Joya was not around. I told her afterwards what he tried with me, but she didn't believe me. According to her, I sucked everything out of my head and had a rich imagination. According to her Dinesh would never do something like that with me. She always kept a close eye on him, and according to her, he was an honorable, loyal guy. This gave Dinesh the freedom to do whatever he wanted to me. Joya didn't believe it when I tried to explain to her what that man was trying to do. In the end, Dinesh raped me more often, abused me, and touched me wherever he wanted. There was nothing I could do. Joya one day simply told me in full detail how she killed my father. Apparently, she took pleasure in seeing me sad. She said she had put a pile of dead people's ashes in my father's food, which had been processed by a Haitian. So that's how my father met his end. She had done this because she wanted my father's belongings. His life meant nothing to her. She did not regret her actions at all, she also added. Thank you for sharing the story. Here's the translation into English, with some textual adjustments for clarity and flow. She proudly recounted what she had done to Grandpa Kishan and Grandma Rochelle. "I got them good. They deserved it. I had them killed by a Haitian hitman because they were not good people. Did you know that they used dark magic on your father so he would hate your mother? He treated your mom like dirt, causing her immense pain. She loved him so much, but he never treated her right, thanks to the black magic from your grandparents. Your Grandma Rochelle confessed this to me herself. So I didn't feel any remorse when I had them taken out. She didn't like your mom because she was worried your mom would take all the money. So, through black magic, she could control your dad and make him do whatever she wanted. One of those things was to make him treat your mom like dirt, which drove her to suicide because she couldn't take it anymore. And the final straw was when your father discarded your mom like a piece of trash. This caused her to take her own life because she was utterly broken by his behavior. And that's all because of your grandma, who didn't want your mom to inherit any money if something happened to your dad. Grandpa Kishan, he was a well-known con artist. Everyone knew him. He also mistreated your mom, constantly bullying her and making her life miserable in every possible way. I believed Joya because everything she said seemed to add up. Looking back, I remembered some things my father told me during his sad moments, and it all seemed like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. But I couldn't forget that Joya was the one who murdered my father. She could talk all she wanted about how terrible my grandparents were, but she was no better. She had killed my father for money and property, and she was proud of it. How could she think she was any better? My parents had been together for years, but when they got married, my dad's parents constantly fought with him until he was fed up, and he ended the marriage. Of course, this was also due to the black magic from Grandma Rochelle, as I mentioned earlier. My dad wasn't himself anymore because of the devilish forces my grandma used on him. Growing up as a kid, I always wondered why I didn't have a mom. I asked people around me why I didn't have a mom. When I learned that my father had left my mother, I wondered if he ever truly loved her. Why else would he leave her? Why would you cause your loved one so much pain and sadness that she takes her own life? I couldn't understand it. But later, it all became clear to me through what Joya said, and the evidence I found that showed my father had hired an expensive lawyer to take me away from my mother. My mom fought until the end to keep me, but it was a losing battle for her. And it was also a loss for me, because now I have lost both parents. I have no family, no siblings. I'm completely alone. I keep wondering why my father caused my mother so much pain, leading her to take her own life. Why, Dad? Why did you go so far? Couldn't you fight against the black magic? Couldn't you see something was wrong? Why did you take me away from Mom? Why did you do that to her? Couldn't you see that Grandma Rochelle was destroying your life and your family? Didn't you realize how much Mom cared about you and tried to keep her family together? Dad, I wish you were here. I'd show you how much I hurt Grandma Rochelle, so you'd understand how it feels to have your mother hurt you. Then you'd know what it's like when someone destroys your family. How could you be so cowardly, Dad? You said nothing when your mom was mean to me, when I wasn't allowed to wear nice clothes, or buy or eat anything I wanted. You just watched like a zombie and said nothing when your mother treated me so badly. Why, Dad? You did nothing. You didn't stand up for me. Your only daughter, your only child, and you thought that was okay? I blame you, Dad. You knew how cruel your mother was, yet you took me to live with her, despite knowing that the doctor said I was too small, weak, and fragile. You still brought me to your mom. Why didn't you leave me with Mom? Why, Dad? Why did you do this to me? Dad, why didn't you just choose Mom and your family? Why did you still eat at Grandma Rochelle's house, even though you knew how she always talked bad about Mom? She was your great love and wife, wasn't she? You should have known that Grandma had bad intentions. I blame you for not using your brain to make smarter decisions. If you hadn't gone to Grandma's, she wouldn't have put black magic in your food. But no, you always put your mother first, and you forgot about your family. When Mom was pregnant with me, you neglected her and spent all your time at your mother's house. Why didn't you leave my mom's life earlier? Maybe then she wouldn't have had to take her own life. Maybe she would have moved on and continued living. Why did you wait? Why didn't you separate from Mom earlier? It would have been better if you had, because maybe my mom would still be alive. All my classmates still have both parents, and I have no one. Why did you do this to me? I'm your daughter. Wasn't it your duty as a father to protect and love me? I hope you can see from heaven or hell what I'm going through now. How I'm breaking inside. How empty and broken I feel. I hope you're happy with yourself, Dad, with the choices you made. Every time Joya's man abuses me, I bleed and I think of you. Because you took care of this. If you weren't so docile and allowed everything your mean parents told you, this wouldn't have had to happen. Then Mama would still be alive, and Joya would never be in our lives. Then you would still be alive too. But now, a strange man touches me. Now, I am damaged for the rest of my life. I have been raped countless times by a stranger, thanks to your stupid choices. Where are you as a father who should have protected me? If you were here, you would protect me. You would protect Mom, and you would give me a family. Like any other child, I wanted a normal life. But sadly, that will never happen for me. I don't want to live anymore because I don't see a future for myself. I can't keep living on this earth. I'll never have my own family because I'm afraid that a man will also abandon me, lie to me, and throw me aside like garbage once he's done playing with me. Just like you did to Mom, despite her pleas and sleepless nights. I want to die so I can finally see my mom in the other world. Then she can finally hold me in her arms and tell me she cares about me and loves me. Because you took all of that away from me. The love I lacked my entire life, she could finally give me then. I yearn for the moment when my mom is finally with me. Then she can feed me from her own hands. I'm so broken. What should I do? I have so many questions that I ask myself every single day. Dad, I blame you. You have no idea how much I blame you. I'm desperate. Dad, give me answers. Why did you break up our family? Mom wasn't perfect, but if she was so bad, how did you manage to create me? Why did you always tell me she was a perfect person, yet you hurt her so much? You are far from perfect too, but Mom loved you so much that she couldn't see your faults because she loved you so much. Where you fell short, she willingly tried to fill the gaps. You told me so yourself. And yet, sigh, now I'm doubting whether I'm even your daughter. I'm ashamed of you. Dad, why did you have to flirt with Mom's best friend on the phone? How could you talk bad about Mom to her own friend? That friend is still alive, and she told me everything and showed me the messages you sent her. I looked through Mom's old files, and she tried so hard to keep her family together, but you destroyed everything with your lawyer. I saw documents from the court. You were determined to take me away from my mother. Why? Because now you're not even here for me. I'm left to fend for myself without you or Mom. You should have just left me with my mom and gone on with your life. None of this would have happened. You left my mom lonely and broken. Everything she loved, you took away from her. What did you gain from it? What you achieved was breaking the people who cared about you. Like Mom, I'm now alone. Every child comes from a mother and needs their mom's warmth. That's how God arranged it. But I never got that warmth because my antisocial dad wanted to play God. From my mom's diary, I could read that she admitted she wasn't perfect, but she tried to do everything as best as she could. And she always loved my father. He was the one who was always mean and nasty to her. So, when I die someday, I don't even want to meet my father in the afterlife. I want to see my mom, and I absolutely don't want to see my dad. Now, everyone walks with their parents, but I walk with my stepmother's boyfriend, who indulges his desires on me as if I belong to him. I don't want to live anymore. I'm going to join my mom very soon, and no one will ever see me again. Dad, I saw your brother at the riverside, who, thanks to your disbelief in black magic, has become a beggar. According to you, black magic was nonsense, and you believed nothing when people warned you. But look where your brother ended up. A beggar along the riverside because of the same black magic from Joya that you thought was nonsense and superstition. Are you proud of yourself, Dad? And now Joya's boyfriend, Dinesh, your own brother, sits at the riverside feeding him food scraps like a dog. They were laughing and mocking him. Dad, this is the life you chose for us. Dad, thanks to your disbelief. Dad, thanks to your stubbornness. Thanks to your foolish choices. If only you had listened to Mom, chosen your family, you would still be alive. Mom would still be alive too. You would have had a beautiful family and a loving daughter who would have loved you intensely. I'm bitter now, and I will never be able to forgive you or your parents. Dad, you really have yourself to blame. All you've left for me in this life is misery, sadness, and pain. If this was your goal, congratulations, Dad. You've achieved it. From my mom's diary, I read that something dark, a demonic entity, was following her. I visited a few shamans to try to get more information about it, to find out what it could be, but they couldn't find anything about it. Additionally, I also investigated to see if I could find more information about Grandma Rochelle. From one shaman, I learned that she was known for dabbling in occult practices. She wasn't a novice, and her whole life she practiced black magic, so she wasn't a good person. But I already knew that about Grandma Rochelle, and this man confirmed it for me without me telling him who she was. He also told me that my grandmother worshipped demonic entities, made offerings, and performed rituals in secret without the family's knowledge. Outwardly, my grandmother always portrayed herself as a church-going old lady, but I soon realized it was all just a performance. With these dark powers, Grandma Rochelle was able to destroy my parents' family. I'm very glad that Grandma Rochelle is dead now. Joya will get her punishment too, because she has the blood of 3 people on her hands. She wanted to play God, so her karma will eventually catch up with her. as soon as you use black magic to harm others, you eventually get your just desserts. Thank you for listening to this unsettling story. We understand that it may touch on sensitive topics, and we appreciate your time and attention. If you have comments or tips for the writer, we'd love to hear them in the comments section. Your feedback helps us improve our stories and address important issues. If this story has affected you in any way, and you feel like you need support or assistance, please don't hesitate to reach out to us via email. We want to be there for our listeners, especially during difficult times. Your well-being is our priority. Thank you again for listening, and take care.